Guy at the boys club, he's 89 years old, and he told me this story. He said, I went to boys club the first day. My friend told me to come. I got into a fight, got kicked out, and I got to the door on the way out because they told me to get out. They said, and get your ass back here tomorrow. I ended up becoming the assistant attorney general of Colorado. You know, he had a big career. He's a donor to the boys club. You know, he said, but, you know, if they had kicked me out and I hadn't turned back and they hadn't told me to come back, who knows? Because that was my only place that I could have had a chance.
Yeah, so what do you think it means to be a good man? We know Ashanti from a prior episode. He's the recipient of the 2023 U.S. Surgeon General's Medallion, 4 times TEDx speaker, podcaster, and Fulbright Fellow. His work as an emotional locksmith has been featured at SXSW, on CNN's This Is Life with Lisa Ling, Kelly Clarkson Show, and an award-winning documentary, The Mask You Live In, which premiered at Sundance. He's the founder and executive director of the Ever Forward Club, a nonprofit organization dedicated to eliminating the student dropout rate through youth mentorship. He's also the creator of the award-winning Million Mask Movement with almost 100,000 participants worldwide today. So thank you for being here, Ashanti.
Thank you.
And then we also welcome Stephen Tosh. He's the executive director and CEO of the Boys Club of New York. Since joining Boys Club of New York in 2010, he led the organization through major milestones, including the launch of BCNY's Sleepaway Camp in Harriman State Park and the first Bronx Boys Club. Previously, Stephen served as the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Albany, the director of staff secure detention for the New York City Department of Juvenile Justice, and the director of community care at the New York City Youth Bureau. He's a former adjunct instructor at NYU's sociology department and taught at the Manhattan Children's Psychiatric Center, and has an MA, ABD in sociology from NYU and BA from Dartmouth. So thank you for being here. Anything you want to add or edit from your bios
I would say that the
Mask Movement.
Mask Movement. We're a member of that.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's how we got connected. Sorry, I got the name wrong.
No,
awesome.
That's good. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was at one of your jamborees.
Yeah. And it was such a great day, and the kids were so inspired. And Venkat, who you have spent some time working with, who's an alumnus, and he's now the physical education director of our Queens Clubhouse. He got hurt, and he wasn't able to see you, but he was so excited just to hear your name and know that you'd be here.
Yeah, what was beautiful was that, you know, the jamboree brings clubs together. And I think that the staff, as they started to hear more about what the mask was about, they got it, right? They're working with boys all the time. And when we did the activity and they heard masks, we even had a beautiful experience in the room where, you know, a word was read out, boys in their immaturity and their development, right, start giggling, right? A boy who had read that word, who had wrote that word, who felt the word, you know, spoke up. He said it wasn't his word, but he said, you know, I heard some giggling happening during that time, and he says, you know, this is one of the reasons that people don't take off the mask. Even though it's anonymous, right? No one knows who it belonged to, but the giggling in the space, just another reminder sometimes why it's so hard even to own up to what you're going through. And let's know when you hear it being read out and there's the giggling happening. And it was beautiful. I think it wasn't a chastising moment, it was a learning moment, right? And I think that's what our boys need, is a space to... Boys are sometimes silly, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it's, that silliness, am I not connecting the fact that that word belongs to someone, could be hurtful, right? And so I think it was just a beautiful, it was a beautiful moment, like a learning in the moment, right?
And the whole auditorium sort of got involved in it in a positive way. And, you know, one of the things we say at the Boys Club when kids are acting out, is that how you want to show up today? Is that who you want to be today? And knowing that it's developmentally appropriate to be silly, to tease sometimes, to do things that, you know, you do without thinking, or trying to impress somebody who's not the right person that you need to impress. But then we move on, you know, when we giggle and, we look at each other, and now we move on to the next thing. And that's really important for all of us. But I think for boys to know that they didn't wreck everything, they just made a mistake. And, we say onward, that's our mantra.
Yeah, I love hearing the origin story about what brought you together, and I'm glad we're all here today. Because you both focus so much time and attention on young boys and men at an organizational level, I'm curious, why is that structure so important? And I'd love to hear specifically about goals and structure for your organization and why you think it's an effective way to support them.
So the what we say at the Boys Club, which is, I tell the boys, so we're a club. And the same way our board members and wealthy people have clubs, golf clubs, men's clubs, dinner clubs. And then there's people that work there that take care of business. And so our boys are the members of the club, and we're the people that help take care of business. And so we're there to support, to answer questions, to deal with emergencies, but ultimately it's their club. And I said, so what's a club about? I said there's a lot of things that you get when you're, privileges in a club, and you take advantage of those. And so we ask you to take advantage of what the privileges are. You decide what you want to do, but you don't join the club and then sit around and not be active. And on the other hand, there's responsibilities to who? To yourself, to the other members of the club, to the club itself, and so that really hits home for them. They get that. And sometimes when, somebody said, one of the staff says something, say, wait a minute, I'm a member of the club, you work here, and it's sort of a funny joke, but it's, I think that boys in New York City and the boys that we work with, they don't have a lot that they can call their own. And when we keep insisting that this is their club, it's like, oh, well, my school, they don't say this is your school. The principal and the faculty on it. In the projects, they don't say that this is your project. You live there, but you could easily be kicked out. And that's what resonates, and it means a lot to them.
Yeah, no, that lands hard. I think flipping the ownership model from you're here because I tell you to, and you do these activities because it's like a responsibility as to you own this, you're a member. Like if you want to max out how you can take advantage of this, I think lands really well.
Yeah, really, I didn't know that part. I mean, I knew that you always call them the members, right? When I talked to Vita, when we were talking on the calls for planning for the Jamboree, the members. And it was like they always brought it back to the members, right? The members, and I was like, oh, I didn't know the roots of that. So powerful. Our program is called the Ever Forward Club, right? Yep. And so it's kind of like, you are like, we created it for you. I mean, I was a teacher, didn't know what I was doing, right? So I think thinking about how I created the Ever Forward Club was in this similar kind of vision that how do you create a space for young men where they feel like they're at the center, like. What I'm trying to create is what I wish I had when I was your age. So what do you want to do? Like, okay, for the college tours, where do you want to go visit? Now, some of the young men were not even grade-wise at certain points of their journey, not on the way to college, grade-wise, potential-wise, absolutely. But so you ask them what college they want to go visit. They're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, we're going to Southern California. You need to look up some colleges. Y'all got to tell me where we're going because we got to plan this trip, Yep. And we can't waste time. Like in the next week, right? Which college we're going to visit. So we got to figure out where the hotels are and help putting them in responsibility to be like, oh, this is for me, but it's not happening to me. They're not like, I'm not just going to drag you to Southern California. It's like, no, we're co-planning this. And from the first trip, it was just a vision like, what would it be like to get them out of their own little environment and all they see to say, okay, there's more to my city and more to my space than just showing up to the meetings. Like I'm building a brotherhood, I'm building a community, I'm building something that hopefully will last a lifetime. And so that's how it felt for us. And I think for boys specifically, they're hungry for it. And so without having, in the early days of Ever Forward, the girls in our, it was my classroom. It wasn't a building, it was a classroom. So it was Thursday at lunch, they come in, we get food delivered, and I got to kick everybody else out, right? So the girls were mad, right? I'm like, I can't create a club for girls. What do I know about creating a club for girls, right? But they were like, well, I said, I'll buy you lunch. How about I buy you lunch? They said, we don't want lunch. We want our own club. And I'm like, I'm not the one, I don't have skills for that. And I think they recognized they wanted some of that. And I think the boys, the young men in our program, they didn't know how much it valued. Some of them, like, you now hear their story now, they'll tell you how valuable it was to them, right? But in the moment, they were just like, all right, I committed to this. I'm showing up. We got food. Whether it was a incentive or a bribe, either way, it was a place of like, I know it's consistent, right? I know it's consistent. Branch is going to do what he can to make sure we support it. And it was no other staff, right? So it was just me doing the best I could. And so I think it was just they're hungry for that connection, although society tells them, you don't need to do that. Why are you trying to have more friends with other boys, other young men? And I think that's the part that causes them that pressure of like, oh, what are people saying about me, And we were trying to break that kind of mysteriousness that boys should have a space to talk about how they feel in a healthy way. Because we just can't do it in a regular situation.
Yeah, and I think that, what we're both talking about, but particularly what you were talking about, is that entrance is really important because first you're nervous. You don't want to look bad. You don't know what's going to happen. You're going to get people, your other friends or students saying, what are you doing? Like, what's, that's whack. Like, what, that's not cool. And then you have to sort of, and sometimes they stop coming, and then you get them back. But getting them past that, then they start to see, and they're not necessarily seeing all the heavy duty things we're seeing, but they're feeling at home. They're feeling like this is a place. And I think the same way it's their place. Anything that they feel a sense of ownership, then that opens up their eyes, because now all of a sudden what comes with ownership? Choices, an opportunity to and we used to say, we started a young men's group, and everybody said, oh, we can talk about masculinity and manhood and all. I said, just let them talk about whatever they want. Like, that's like a lot to dump on them. And I always make this point. I said, I was a boy, and, and I grew up, and I don't think I ever said or heard the word masculinity or manhood in my whole childhood. It was like, be a good kid, whatever. But this idea that I had to decide who I was, what kind of man I was going to be. I just needed to decide how I was going to act in the moment, or in, if I was on a team, if I was going to live up to what the expectations were. And so I think that, it's very similar. I also think that when the boys start to see things happening in their orbit that they like the tone of it, they like, the way that you reacted. Like when you told them, you guys come pick it out. At first it's like they're scared, but then they're like, oh, we get to decide, and we use we have a woman named Avita who is our communications person, and she said, we say, all these words about working with them, serving them, like we really want to co-create. You just used that earlier, co-create. We want to partner. We want to, and that creates a responsibility to listen to them. And that, I say, we don't care if we don't want to stop at getting a seat at the table. We want you to sit down and participate and know that you have an equal say in things. And that's been hard for a lot of, even some of the parents. It's like, we're not used to that. We tell our kids what to do and they do it. They don't, participate in the conversation, but we're very committed to that. And I tell the staff, if we make that, if this works, and I'm not doing this for this reason, you'll have a much better day, because you'll actually have an engaging interaction, and you'll have fun, and they'll be enthusiastic. And, that's a great side product of, have enough confidence as a staff person that you can let go a little bit and have, like, let down some of the barriers and let them run a little bit, and they'll come back. And and when they don't, we figure out how to get them back, in a safe and secure way.
Yeah. So you both, thank you for the overview. And so you both run clubs for young boys, focus on supporting them. When you think about other resources that they could take advantage of, it could be like just a generic tutoring program, or like a sports team, like what is the difference maker that the connective tissue of getting a club of young boys together, like what are they getting from that helps them in a way that's something like generic, like a tutoring program, do your homework together kind of thing?
Well, I think the idea of mutual aid, or the idea that they work together, a lot of our boys learn that the most in sports because they're the most excited about that. And we have something called the 4 C's: confidence, competence, character, and connection. And we don't hit them over the head with that, but the foundation of every program has all of those usually, but certainly some of them. And so I think that it's also the notion of talking to each other, being willing to step up for yourself, but also to listen, all the sort of fundamental things that we, try to teach our children and our students if you're a teacher, and try to, live yourself. And, that's what my wife tells me, listen and, think about other people around you. And, all those are the things that, and we, going back to what Ashanti had said earlier, I mean, the kids make mistakes, and then we make mistakes in responding to them and exacerbate them. But when we just keep going, and we eventually, people always say, do you have mentoring? And I said, well, everybody mentors everybody, and real mentoring, of course, is built on trust, and you can only have trust when you see people do the things and live up to the statements they make. Every time I speak to the whole staff, I said, okay, and they all, I say some good stuff that they like, and then I say, well, stop. I said, just remember everything I said, just words. That's all they are right now. Now you come back and tell me, did I live up to them? That's what life's about. So, and that's the kind of things. But I sometimes feel I lecture too much to the kids, and we lecture too much to the kids, and don't let that just happen naturally. And I think that's where we try to back off. And the Boys Club's all about fun and movement, and that's, they come in from school and we immediately have them moving, and because school is the first step past school. I mean, I always say, I said, what's the best part of when you were in elementary school? I said, hitting that push bar at 3 o'clock and leaving school, and we were we all just went out and we're so happy, and that. But then where were you going? We just went to the park and played. One last quick thing, and I know I'm talking a lot, but so I just realized, I was looking through some pictures. So when I was a kid in Evanston, Illinois, right next to Chicago, and I went to the Y, and we had clubs. And I was in the Cassie Russell Club. I don't know if you know who he was. He was a 3 or 4 time All-American at Michigan. He later played for the Knicks. He didn't have as great a professional career. He played for the Lakers too, but he was a big deal in Chicago at the time. And we got to go to when the Knicks were playing the Bulls, and had our picture taken with him. And I saw that picture the other day, and I'm like, those were my boys, and that meant so much. I mean, I got tears in my eyes. So I think. And the Boys Club had group clubs, which are minor, smaller groups, and they had a name, like guys in their 80s. Yeah, I was on the different, they had different names, and then I couldn't remember. There were some really good ones, but I didn't remember them. But the Bombers was one of my boss was on the Bombers, and then you stayed with that your whole time at Boys Club. And some of these guys 50, 60 years later would, they were still the Bombers. So, and that seems to me to be what middle class and wealthier people have, this sense of security and stability. Their families stretch in both directions. They have connections to people, and that's what we're trying to do they call it social capital, right? But we just try to, do it so they feel like they have something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thank you for that, because I think that for the context, I think you all have actually physical clubs, right? Like buildings. So at our Forward Club, we don't have a physical place where young people go. We go to schools. So I was a teacher, so that's how it started. I was a teacher, and I saw that there was a need for some young men at that site to do something, right? And I think I've taught at many different school sites before as a teacher, and realized that some school sites, students can't stay after school. There's only one bus that leaves. They got to be on that bus. So you may want them to stay after school for a program, but they can't. And so I think like figuring the places that allow students in their own communities, in their neighborhoods, to be able to go is so valuable. What the Boys Club of New York is doing, and I think, they've been doing it for the years. I mean, you got to tell them how long you've been around. We're new on the block, right? We're new on the block. But as a former teacher, what I saw is there was a need at the school to create safety and care. I think oftentimes there has been community centers that were like, oh, I left school and then I went to the community center and I had this great experience. And sadly, no one checked on schools to make sure they were those safe places. And as a teacher, I was like, no, there needs to be safety here. Like, yeah, you can have it when you get home, and you can have it in your community, and you can have it at the center if you go to, but why are we not having it here? And because that's where I worked all day long, I was like, well, we're going to build it here. We're going to build a space where you feel safe, where you know that if you're having a rough day, you can come in and grab a snack or grab a juice or come sit on the couch or take a nap. Like we need. I think sadly schools have been let off the hook sometimes for some of the things that I think they should do. And I love teachers, I love schools, but I'm also, as a former teacher, I have earned the right to talk about where they mess up and where they fail. And I've oftentimes tried to like dance between not saying anything bad about schools, but schools have some blame in making spaces unsafe. I'm not blaming anyone individually in those schools, but the system, the way they design, right?
Yeah.
So why should a kid have to leave school to feel safe? That should not be the way it is. And so as an organization, what we try to do is say, look, we see you, we value you, you matter here, you're the owners here. And sometimes you have to give some students some game, like, hey, here's how you handle this. Or you want to change your class, the counselor says you can't. Okay, here's how you do it. And you give them a tip. You say, okay, tonight you're going to go home, you're going to write a letter why you want to change this class. You're going to have your mom at the bottom sign it that they agreed to the letter that you wrote. And you're going to bring it to me in the morning, and I'm going to sign it with you. And then we're going to deliver it to the counselor's office. So now you went in there as a student on your own to tell her to change the class. That didn't work. So good. Now we're going to bring some reinforcements. And I think what I try to do in a school building is make sure that students knew they didn't have to try and figure it out by themselves. And I think sometimes we just leave students, and sometimes we teach parents too. Like, how do you have more power than I do sometimes. So how about we give you some tips and tools on how to make this environment work better for your son or in this space. So that's some of the things we try to do in Ever Forward is make it so that they could feel, not just tell them the words, but they actually feel it, like through examples, right? They knew that if they came to Portable 8, that somebody was going to listen to them there, right? They got in trouble for this. They did this thing's happening, blah, blah, blah. Everyone blamed them. Okay, right? Now I'm going to ask you some critical questions. So if you're to blame, we're going to find out quick, right? Because I ain't going to be tiptoeing around the truth, right? But you know that I'm going to listen to you.
Yep.
I'm going to listen to your side. And I'm going to ask you hard questions because you would expect that of me. You would expect me not to just be like, oh, I'll let you lie to me, and I'll just sit here and smile, be like, because I care about you, I won't hold you accountable. No, that's not how we do it here. Like, I care about you, I want to support you, and we're gonna figure out how to solve it. If you messed up, let's deal with the fact that you messed up. Let's do some accountability. Let's get you back to square one. But we can't you can't have me having your back and then you not being honest about the situation. So it's about building both sides of that, right? The accountability, the brotherhood, the community, the love, support. I love the 4 C's, right? We may have to borrow those.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you said so many important things, but the idea that, boys, families, parents, they often don't know what to do, and they also often don't think that they can make a difference. They can go in and make a case. And that's when, you're providing that guidance. And that's a learning experience, because that learning that, together you can work something out is something that you can do in other situations also. And I think the other thing that Ashanti said, which is so critical, is the kids act like they don't want you to be strict and tough with them. They test you and they expect you, particularly probably a lot of your kids have been disappointed time after time. So they push you to walk away, to give up on them because they don't want to go through this and then be played. And so when you stick with them, it's like life-changing. It's really important.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I've felt it in my far briefer teaching experience too, that push, the testing of I'm going to be really hard because if you're going to break, I don't want to get attached to you, and you're going to leave when it gets hard. So I think that's a really important concept for like teachers to understand. And it was also really cool to hear about two different models with differences and similarities of like a physical location, like geography, very local is so important. And then Ashanti, you're bringing like concepts and resources and people within the school to provide similar types of connection, understanding, and autonomy for the young boys. And so I think it's powerful to hear about how this kind of social connective tissue for boys can be developed in those two different ways. In schools, and we talked about this in our prior conversation about teaching teachers and teaching parents about, hey, like your boy wants this and needs this, and they're not just going to be okay with this level. And then also creating a physical space for boys to go, and that's not school. It's a third space for community, for learning, for development. And the visual of like the push bar leaving the school is like totally triggered a memory for me of like that feeling. And to have a place that's structured and organized for you to see your friends and do fun things and hard things is a really cool concept. And those community spaces are such when they're not there, it's kind of like intangible. You don't really know what's missing if it's not there. But once it's there, you can really feel it and see the difference, which just makes them so important.
And I think the notion that so boys of color in big cities, especially, particularly in the downtown, there's a lot they can go there, but it's conditional, right? They have to behave right. They don't have any right to go anywhere, actually. And they, and there's expectations. Take your hat off, don't, step out of the way, we're going to surveil you so you can go shopping here, but we're going to walk around and make sure you don't steal anything. And so we're pushing for the boys to challenge that, but we say, well, we're not asking you to go and, do things and you're going to get beat up by the cops, but we're saying that understand that, you have to, even if you can't do it right now, think about your rights. Why are you not able to do the things the kids from the Upper East Side can do? Because they look, even if they look like don't dress very well, they look the part. They're accepted into those neighborhoods. And I do a lot of talking about this because that happens in school too. Some kids are distrusted just when they walk in. That's why his work is so much harder, because we tell the boys, this is yours. You can't get kicked out. I mean, it's almost impossible. In the 15 years I've been there, we've kicked out 2 boys. One had been making very difficult, threatening calls anonymously to one of our female staff, and she was, really having a problem. And the other one was he had an aide that he had to have, and he beat up his aide. He just wasn't, couldn't fit. And we felt bad about both of them, but the idea is that there's a guy at the boys club, he's 89 years old, and he told me this story. He said, I went to boys club the first day, my friend told me to come, I got into a fight, got kicked out, and I got to the door on the way out because they told me to get out. They said, and get your ass back here tomorrow. And 4 days in a row, he ended up becoming the Assistant Attorney General of Colorado. He had a big career, he's a donor to the boys club. He said, but, if they had kicked me out and I hadn't turned back and they hadn't told me to come back, who knows? Because that was my only place that I could have had a chance. So those are the stories that, I mean, and he tells the best stories, and even in the movie, like, the seeing him in action, that's the sense of, togetherness, which, and, a mutual accountability, which is so critical.
Yeah, so powerful. So powerful. So powerful.
And that kind of ties back to the teacher testing moment of like, if I make this hard or show friction or show challenges and you give up, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And the second chances and the commitment, it's commitment to you with accountability. It's like you have to show faith, but we're not going to just give up when it's hard. Is such an important mentality for development of young people, because they're exploring, they're going to push boundaries, they're going to push buttons, see where they can have you bend. And if you can respond with like commitment, accountability, and authenticity, and they see you model it, then the trust gets built, and then you get the really special connection and learning.
And it's a very strong developmental skills for the staff, because many of them, when I first started at Boys Club, we didn't do a lot of training. Like, there was a lot of talk about putting down gays and nasty stuff, and a lot of the staff, like, I'd say, why didn't you intervene? Why didn't you say something? And, if they were honest, they said, because I didn't want everybody think that I like gay, I like gays, that I was a faggot, or whatever the words were. And I said, well, and then, or what a lot of, if they're not comfortable, they turn their back. They act like they didn't hear it. They act like they didn't see it, and I don't blame them. I mean, these are tough situations, and, you have to give them the skills and the confidence. Always going back to the 4 C's, the competence and the confidence, and the connected with, they know their fellow staff have their back. So we're all learning in this process. And I was lucky because I came up, in a tough neighborhood and tough kids, and I, learned how to take care of myself. But I mainly, not that this sounds a little silly, but like, I hated when kids got bullied, so I'd jump in and fight, on the side when kids were bullied. But when I got older and you started, getting that confidence, then it was really, you realize how important it is, and and that's what I try to instill in the staff. And of course the boys, we went through this whole period, like, don't fight back, you have to turn the other cheek and all that, and I mean, it's all great, but it's not realistic for a lot of the guys, right? And then especially when they have their dad coming in or their mom saying, who's the kid that was bothering you, go punch him in the face, and like, so those aren't things that happen a lot, but it's the kind of, they have to navigate very complicated worlds, and sometimes we don't understand that. I mean, if we don't really look through their eyes at what they're experiencing.
Mm. Yeah, and I think especially the part about the teachers have to be in a position of strength and confidence to go up against the friction of a group and not assimilate. And you gave the example of like denigrating gay people. You have to be the one that's be like, nope, stop. And it sounds like, okay, if I was in that situation, of course I would say this or stand up for this. When you're facing a group, a large room, like you said, it can be a simple gesture of just turning around. You didn't hear it, so you're not directly confronting it, and then doing that times 100, you modeling it 24/7 when you're in the presence of the students is a big challenge, but an important one. And like you said, teachers are human, and that learning and training is a big part of becoming like that model teacher who the students can look up to and trust them to call them on their stuff, right? So I think that's an important.
Now, you're excellent at all of that. Is that something that was natural to you, or was that something you grew up and developed your skills just in the neighborhood, or a combination of things?
I mean, I think, I came from engineering and then I came to teaching. Engineering is a whole lot of smack talking out in the construction field. So I came from there to a classroom where you were just like, oh, there has to. When I heard types of language, when I heard that like homophobic language, my role was always like, I could ignore it as a teacher. You're teaching. I'm here to do this, and you hear a little something on the side. And me, sadly, I hear too much. I hear everything. I pick up on a lot of stuff. I pick up on people's emotions like from across the room. Right. I'm a very. It's a
vibe.
It's a gift. It's a gift, and sometimes it's a curse. Right. Like my mom, 3 months before I was born, she started grieving my father's death, right? So she passed down to me a lot of feeling, emotions, right? So if I'm in a classroom and I hear somebody saying, oh, that's like a gay, right? And that's the language that young people, I'm not in a classroom directly anymore, but I know it still pops up, right? And I'm just like, right, like just where, okay, because I don't know who said it, now I'm just looking for emotions. I'm looking for energy. I'm looking for something that's a little off. And I'm like, and I'll just say, where'd that come from? Who said that? And then people didn't hear anything, won't say anything. And then I'm like, I feel something over here. So I'll go over to the area where I think it is. And I think it's what I have seen. And I'm about to jump into a new story. I confront it. And I say, look, I don't know. If I'm not sure where it came from, I'm like, I don't know who just said that, but that's not okay here. That kind of language is not okay here. Like if this is what you do at home, you do it at home. But here we don't do it. And I think it's because I have this role as a teacher, I also have a responsibility to create a space where everyone feels safe. And so there's certain things that I just don't accept in this space. And if that's what you do in your personal life, your private life, I can't stop you. But I am going to say in here, we don't talk to each other like that. And I think I've been walking down the hall and heard somebody say it up front of me. Another adult just totally missed it. Yeah. And now I'm like, I got to be the one who walks by it and say something because I didn't miss it. Yeah. And how many times do you pick up on it and hear it and ignore it? Or how much time do you say something? And I felt like, okay, I'm nobody's making me address it, but I'm going to always address it. And I'll just say, hey, I need you to watch your language. We don't talk like that here, right? And I don't spend a whole lot of time. I'm not going to give no speech, but I'm going to say it so you know that I'm hearing you, that I'm watching, I'm paying attention, and I'm not going to be pushed into silence, even if it's discomfort. I'd rather just be the cool teacher who everyone just likes and gets along, but now I got to be the one who's always like monitoring. And I'm not even trying to monitor. Yeah. I'm not looking for it. It's like, if it comes to me, then I'm going to say something. And I think that's a hard part sometimes in education, right? Like being the teacher who is like, always picking out the problems. And it's like, I prefer not to have heard it. You know what I'm saying? Now, but since you said it such that I can hear it, then you are now a part of the community with me. And so I think it's a lot of work. I mean, I wish it was easier.
Do you think it's better than it was, that it's changed a bit?
I mean, I think that they just do it in different ways now, right? I mean, it's different language, right? They're probably saying stuff about it that I don't even know what they're saying, right? Now they use the word zesty. Right? That's the new, right? But it's a new language, right? So now it may be happening around us, and if adults aren't clear, we're not paying attention to it, Like the movie Adolescence, right? When I learned stuff in that movie about emojis that I have no clue about. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. So they're not going to say anything with words. They're going to put some little pictures there, and only that generation kind of gets it until we get smarter and we get a teenager teaching us. So I think it's like, do I think it's easier? I think it's maybe actually harder now.
Yeah, I think that it's less overt and it's less, where you can just, because also a lot of gay young people are starting to say, no way, I'm not accepting this. And there's, and at the boys club, and we had gay staff who, hadn't come out because they were afraid of their colleagues, and and that's changed a lot, and for the better, and they they don't want to be the ones like, I don't have to police all of this because I'm gay, but they step up because they're dealing with it in the rest of their life, and it's not just gay is just one aspect. I mean, a lot of it is also weaker kids and kids that it's funny, at boys club, it's often white kids. We have very, very few, and they often, it's like if you're playing something and you lose to a white kid, like, then the other kid gets a lot of teasing. But that seems to be handled by the group better, because the white kid he's a member of the boys club like everybody else, and he's got friends and he's got, a place. And so I like to let some of that go for a while and let them try to work it out. That's one of the challenges I find, is that I'd love for everything, like when they're playing pool and they're arguing about something, and the staff, I'd like let it go for a minute and see what happens. Obviously, we don't want one kid hitting the other one over the head. But one of the things I've learned, and I don't know, maybe it's just where I've lived, but most people talk a lot about fighting, very few fight. And so it's a lot of, I'm going to mess you up and all this stuff. And they're like, and then, but I said, and that's okay, because that's a role that is part of their role that they have to play. And but I like to, the more they can figure things out. I had a question for you. Is the anger that kids feel in school partly because I don't know about at your school, art, music, even like lunch is like 20 minutes, like everything that's not, school has been taken out of school. That's what we do. We get all that fun stuff to do with them without the academics. But I don't know. I know a lot of, the kids really complain about, that the school day is just like one class after another, and you don't get a chance. You can never talk to anybody. You got to rush to get there if you're late. Especially the charter schools. It's often, like so rigid because they want us to feel like an even longer day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you just have that the bell rings and everyone's done, right? Mm-hmm. I think you just imagine, like, what you expect to hear. Lunchtime happens, it's going to get loud real fast, right? All the energy is coming out of the classrooms. I mean, it's almost like they're in a mad rush. They want to get first in line to get lunch. They want to go get their lunch if they brought lunch and go sit at the right table. It's kind of like, I wish the energy, you wish, like, how do you create a learning environment where that type of energy is about also going to class, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not because you're going to get a detention. It's because we're going to miss what's about to happen in the class, right? And I think same thing like that bell at the end of the push bar. You're like, I'm out of here. Let's go, right? Like, how do we create a learning environment that they want to come to, right? I remember being at one of the boys' clubs when they had a competition. I think it was a pool. There was ping pong. One was ping pong, was pool. And it was beautiful to watch, right? Because, I'm an observer. I'm picking it. I'm watching. Some of the guys on this side are friends of this guy playing. Some on that, friends on that side. And then the game, it ends. The winner, moved on to the next round of this competition. And I think it was really beautiful to see. I'm cheering for my guy, but I'm also not downing anyone else, right? I think it's like that has to be created as a space, right? I think the temptation was like, yeah, we beat you and all that, but it was like, we know that guy's hurting, right? We know he just as well could have lost, right? Our guy could have lost. And so we are like we're going to cheer. And it was beautiful because they cheered and it didn't go so over the top that it was like, you suck, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was when I was an observer watching in the room, I'm like, that was quite quite that may not always happen that way. I mean, I may just be a fly on the wall in that moment, but you watched it and you're like, okay, like it can be like that. It can be like, I cheer for my guy and I don't have to like now harm you emotionally because you now have taken a L, right? A loss. But I think that's what we try and do. Yeah. I think we try and make how do you make an environment where that is welcomed? Cheering for your guy is welcome. And you may give a little banter, but I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we emphasize, which was a real push of mine, is one BCNY. Boys Club, we call it BCNY. And so if you're in the Flushing Clubhouse, so we have something called Game Room Association, which is the best of the boy. They have internal, playoffs, and you get to make the team, and then you go, and they're on Saturdays, and they have they have foosball, they have mostly ping pong and pool are like the big games, and they play, and some clubs might win everything one year and then not. We also have we have a cooking program, which is a separate thing, and that's very like competitive about this. And you get this big trophy, you take it to your clubhouse for that year. And we've had boys getting mad. We had one boy push all this stuff when they lost, because there's the Game Room Association, unless you win or lose a game by the points. The cooking, we have the judges. It's like a TV cooking show, and the judges aren't always right, and then they all want to be judges, and then they get there and it's like, I don't want to pick the winner, they're going to hate me. I said, yeah, that's the way it works. But we've now gotten like tougher people that work in the business, and they also want to act like they're on one of those shows, like with all their talk about these different things. The boys don't really understand all of that, but the cooking is. But I like what you just said, and even if they, like when the boy cried, everybody said, oh, make him, apologize. I said, give him a little break. I mean, he's a 12-year-old kid crying because he lost, and now he's embarrassed because everybody's looking at him and trying to fix him and make him right. And, and I think that's part of what, middle-class kids, not all of them, but there's a lot of, and private schools, there's a lot of coddling. Everybody, it's all about feeling safe and secure and, not being pushed too hard. And I didn't know that because I grew up in public school, and I didn't know, and the charter schools are really not that way. And I want the boys club to be a combination of hard-charging, kids that are really trying and pushing to their edge. At the same time, there's an understanding that, I tell them, like, by next week you don't even remember who won this game. That doesn't mean you shouldn't play hard and care that you won or lost, but it means you shouldn't, like, carry it with you. Mm-hmm. Put it aside and move on. And, and that's the way a lot of us should live too, because we carry those, resentments and stuff. So, but when you were in school, did they have all those art and music and wood shop and all that in the school?
I did. I had wood shop. Art wasn't not my thing. I was, mm-hmm. They didn't want me drawing. Music, I wasn't into music. I think I lost. They wanted me to play a clarinet. And I was like, I ain't playing no clarinet. I want to play a saxophone. And so since there were no more saxophones, I was like, well, I'm going to lose this clarinet.
You lost it?
Yeah. I've lost it 3 times. It kept finding me back. I left it on the bus twice. And my mom, she's like a magician. She'd always somehow, I'm not carrying this clarinet to school. You know what I mean? Clarinet is a tiny little box. Like the box is like this big. I am not doing that. I want a big, and it rooted into what people were going to think.
Yeah.
Because rooted into what people were going to think, right? It was not, I know what I wanted to play, and even though I couldn't play that, it wasn't like, well, learn this, you learn the basics, you learn the finger movements, next year you can upgrade. I was just like, I'm not carrying that little tiny box on the bus, Mm-hmm. And it was about image and protection of my own. I mean, there was no man in my house telling me that you can't play a clarinet. It was what I knew people were going to say.
Yeah.
Is listening to people on the bus and listening to people and like, what are you carrying, right? What is
mm-hmm.
that thing? And so even though it wasn't a rule book, the rules were clear. The rules of masculinity were clear. No one said, hey, doesn't look very masculine for you to be carrying that little tiny box. I just felt it. And so anyway, there was the pressure. But so I remember all of those things. And even today, when young people, I don't see a lot of young people carrying instruments.
No, and we have a really big music program, and we don't have enough to like give them, and then they take them home, so they play. And we have a lot of practice spaces where they have headphones, and so there could be like 5 people playing the drums with headphones in the same space. But now some of the parents are saying I didn't really want the music program because I didn't want the noise, but I can see how much it means to him. I can't afford to buy an instrument, and so now we're, starting to give them out, but then it's like we're giving them to the most committed kids, which is a certain logic to that. That makes sense because he's going to take it seriously. But at the same time, maybe we should give them to all the kids because they have signed up for for music, and maybe they would have. A lot of things are circumstantial, right? You get the circumstance. I was just talking to a colleague at Boys Club, and I was saying, did you ever play an instrument? He said, my grandfather did, and he had a guitar, and I watched him. He never even offered to let me hold it, but when he passed, it meant so much to me, and I started playing it, and it became, that was just the circumstance of their lives. I think that one of the challenges is how much do you do for people, right? So we, what if they lose it? Do we give them another one? Do we, all these things that, and we don't really know, and every kid's different. Are they going to take advantage of it? Are they losing it on purpose? Or they, and they always have the same with uniforms, with different things. And we don't charge for anything. And I get criticisms for that. Well, some kids are, nobody's rich at the Boys Club, but some kids, have more resources. And I said, but I don't want to deal with that. I want to work with boys. I don't want to work with their bank and their all of that. And I just trust people. And if they take advantage of us, they do. We have assume positive intent. And, and if people rip us off, or if people, which doesn't happen, but if people take advantage of that and, think we're naive, we are, because that's who we are. We're naive, and we're proud of it because we think you guys are all great. And we're expecting you to live that way and to step up. And, that's more me. And, but it's really been embedded in the Boys Club, and I'm sure there were people like that before. I'm not saying I was special or different, but I don't want to deal with the stuff that doesn't matter, And the one thing, interesting side note. So Boys Club, they not till around 1900. It was a penny to join the Boys Club. Then it was a nickel, a dime, a quarter, $1. When I came, it was $5. And then we got to COVID, and the staff said, because kids are joining all the time, they said, remember at the beginning of COVID, you had to wash everything, wash the dollars. And they said, we just don't want to deal with this. We got too much else to do. And so could we just suspend it? So we suspended it. And then after COVID, I said, what do you guys want to do? Because there's always been some charge. They said, it's so much better not having to deal with this. And the concept was a boy would work really hard to get a nickel or a dime. But I said, they said, the boys come in and their mother or father or parents give the $5. The kids don't work, doing something to get it. So it's not really, that purpose is gone. And it also, to be honest, helps a little with fundraising, saying, no charge for anything. And, that includes sports uniforms, swimsuits, everything. And, but, it simplifies life at the Boys Club. And it also does sort of go back to that notion, it's your club and everything belongs to you, in a greater sense.
Yeah, and it kind of, we talked a bit yesterday about, or 2 days ago, about the people and organizations that show up for men and boys pretty unconditionally, without you have to meet this standard to be involved, mm-hmm. or we only care about the output of the test score or the game score, and so having a club that they can own and feel ownership that is for them unconditionally, and that naive approach is super powerful. Of just saying, we're here to help you, and the help is going to be there whether you take it or not. And I think great. It's really supportive, because I don't think there's many other spaces that reward boys for showing up as themselves without an entrance exam, basically, mm-hmm. to get in.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool, really cool. One thing that I want to ask you about, so we're really, do you get a lot of, you have to evaluate your programs, and, and there's you get a grant, and then they have all this. So it's hard because like people say, well, what about the boys' test scores? Don't they go up? I said, well, because they play basketball and learn to swim at the boys' club, their test scores go up. That is not. We're not a school. It has nothing to do with that. You know, how many go to college? Well, you know, that is not like some do, some don't. But it's not like we don't have a magic, you know, potion to do this. So so I couldn't get over on it. Like I couldn't get a handle on it. So I had this epiphany. We had something called the Boys Club Roadmap, which was, you know, all the different steps to get from age 7 to high school graduation. But I said, that ain't life, right? You know, you go up 12 blocks and you get your this, and then you turn left and you get your that. And so I said, like, lives are messy, you know. I was a star athlete and a good student, and somehow got the idea that I was going to run away from home when I was 16 and hitchhike to California from Chicago, and like, you know, and other things, you know, and we all, you know, missed the shot in the big game, you know, made the shot in the other game, and, you know, ups and downs, you know, the girl didn't go to prom with me, whatever it was. And that's a journey, right? And I say it reminds me a lot of going through the woods on a path, and like you turn left and it's dead end, you turn right and you fall and you skin your leg, and you then see like the most beautiful, you know, group of kids in the pool, in the river, and, you know, it's just all ups and that's what so we start interviewing the boys and interviewing the staff, and then every year we're, you know, and getting into things about, and it's very, you know, personal, and, you know, and it's real life. And so we're then starting to do these sort of taking groups of boys that, you know, it's, oh, you know, we have a lot of boys that, you know, like to come to the boys club, but, you know, they only want to do one thing, you know, and they're not bad or good. It's like, it's just like ideal types, and then we start and we also are giving the boys a lot more. When you were saying you didn't like music or you didn't like art, until they're 13, we make them take. They don't have to take music lessons. They have to do an art, but once they turn 11, they can choose which art, because they've already, when they were younger, had to try everything. It's sort of like food, you know, you got to try everything. Then you can decide if you like it or not. And at first, the foundations looked at me like, you know, we knew you were nutty, but this is like too much. And I just kept pushing it, and we kept refining it. And then we started taping the tapes of the boys. We started bringing those to those meetings, and they hear the boys talking, and then it changed everything. And so I don't know how it's also very instrumental for all those of us who aren't with the boys all the time. So I'm hoping that catches on, and or not. I don't care about everybody else catching on, but I hope that we can refine it enough to make it work. And we're also teaching those young staff, our frontline staff, how to interview, how to, you know, and we give them a lot of, and we pay them extra for participating in those things as a, you know, sort of and they can do some of it, you know, not interview the boys, but some of the things they do, you know, they can do off when they're not at the boys club, and they're always looking for more work and more money, which is understandable.
Yeah, I think that gets to kind of what I was talking about earlier, like the intangible impact of, like, you know it's missing if it's not there. And I think it's the right way to capture that intangible impact with personal anecdotes, right? Because then it's qualitative and it's personal, and you're giving an inside view of how those individual experiences are multiplied by all the people there, and it's not going to be captured with something quantitative like the test scores or the college acceptance rate, because it's this intangible community social development that you hear from the boys that are there. So I think interviews is a really powerful tool for capturing that impact of, like, no, this we may not be able to measure it super precisely with numbers, but we can capture it, and you can tell because you're a person who's hearing it from the boy.
I think when you said that, is one of the things that stuck out to me is that we had the young men who participated in the Masks, Emotions, and Math project, or the Math Behind the Masks. Like that opportunity for those young men, I wish I had thought about it, because I would have loved to come and just talk to them today, right? Like, so maybe the next time I come, but also interview them maybe virtually. Like, what do you remember about that experience? Like, what did they learn? What did they take with them down the line, right? Like a year ago, right? And I think even like thinking about other young men that can take on that project in their clubs, and opportunity for service projects, right? So, hey, here are the things you can learn. Here are the opportunities for you. Some will take on these, some will take on others. And so I'm looking forward to that, because I think that's what we meet, is what we're trying to figure out. How do we build these partnerships, right? How do we build ways that our work can serve others in their own work they're doing in their communities?
And that, everybody loved it when we did it. We had trouble. We have often trouble sustaining things. Yeah. We get distracted by the next new thing, but if you don't sustain them, then you lose the real ability to understand because it doesn't always happen the first day. It's the third time I did the mask, then I started really understanding myself, or it meant something. And, and that's something that the Boys Club's been lucky about, because we have every full-time male staff person in the Flushing Clubhouse is an alumnus of the Boys Club. He grew up in the Boys Club. It's partly because that guy he just retired after 45 years, so he was the father figure to all of them. And that really makes it different. When, that's one of the problems with some of the schools. The teachers turn over every too often, and they never get that, sense of stability, but also somebody who really learns about you, because it's a new person. And, and I think that, but the mask, the idea of doing something over and over, year to year, and seeing how you change, and then you start to internalize that, I think is really cool. And and I was talking the other day about, what if we did photos, we wouldn't show them to outside, but every boy had a photo book, and from the same pose, each year, and watch them, how they change, and not so much growing up even, but body language, smile, everything about, do I look happier, or is this me now, whatever. And I think that those are just the little real life things. When my kids were little, we were constantly doing that kind of thing with them. That's the thing that I realized, that my kids were the center of attention in my life. I wasn't. My family was old-fashioned. My father could sit and smoke his cigarettes and drink coffee, and, we all had to shut up. And he wasn't a bad guy, but it was all about his needs. And, and that's changed. But a lot of our kids go to schools where they're not the center of attention. Certain other kids are, and their families don't have the time. They're rushing. People always ask me, are these parents really? And they always just say the moms, because they assume there's not a father around, which is not true. And are they really committed, or are they just, and I said, you don't know how hard it is to be poor, and, and to really be a good parent, which they are, but the work that goes into that. And, it's so disrespectful when, they do everything, and some of them just will go so out of their way, and, we celebrate them because, and we listen to them too, and we don't always agree. There's issues around religion that, some of them are very conservative or orthodox, and some of our staff or some of the programs we do, are too edgy for them. And then they also, don't like that we give them the boys space, and, they want it to be very strict. And, I said, well, they're going to be in all different environments. They're not at they don't live at the Boys Club. They live with you, and we're, if, we don't, boys aren't sentenced to the Boys Club. They choose to go, and the parents have to sign off. So I said, you make your decisions. I made all sorts of decisions about what I thought my kids could do and shouldn't do. And, we live in Brooklyn. It was no Manhattan kids. They're too loose. They like were more advanced. They had more money. They they knew when their parents were often not there, and we were like Brooklyn, when we had neighbors in our building that kept an eye out what the kids were doing. So we always joked about that. But I think the idea is it does take a village, but the idea is we're not all working that close together. We're all putting our spin on it, which is, I think, okay. But we always defer to the parents, and we always, and sometimes the boys don't like that. I don't like the parents being there that much once the boys get a little older, because I would have never gone to a center if I thought my mom or dad might walk in. Not that I was doing anything bad, but that would be embarrassing. And and we do special things. Like we have nights online, with the parents and, talking and doing things. And then anything I do around yoga or wellness or anything like that, I immediately get a call. Could we do something like that for the parents too? And I said, yeah, sure, will. Most of those people I get are friends of mine or volunteers that come in. And I think with this new clubhouse, it's really going to be a focus on that, and I like that. I like it to be as a community center, but it's still the boys' club at core.
Yeah. I mean, bringing the parents is so important, and giving them a window, but not like a full entrance.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
Is a good way to incorporate them. And I want to be mindful of our time and check in if there's any other things we haven't touched on. It was really cool angle to hear about the models you have for the boys clubs, about tracking impact and thinking about geography and parents and teachers. So a lot of stuff we have never covered in Under the Hood Talk, and an inside look at what do nonprofits think about and the decisions you have to make. So I really appreciate having both of you on here.
Thank you.
The only thing I would just add really quick, which is swimming. It's so important, learning to swim. And this new clubhouse doesn't have a pool, but we focus on that so much. And by
Cool.
age 10, everybody's swimming. And I get a lot of pushback, from funders, swimming is they can go swimming somewhere else. We're not going to pay for that. But I think it's so critical. We had a boy that left the boys club just last summer at the end of school, and moved to Tennessee and went to a party and drowned. He wasn't. We hadn't taught him to swim, and I said, I say this all the time, and then we failed. But swimming is really important, and I've been through growing up, a lot of kids don't learn to swim, and they think they can because they're tough, and then they drown. So, but there is a big new initiative with some of the foundations to let the schools use places like the Boys Club during the day. They'll pay us to run the swimming program, which is good.
Yeah, and it adds a whole physical function of what the human body can do to an arsenal of going throughout your life. So I love that addition. Yeah, I think we will wrap it there. Thank you, Ashanti. Thank you, Stephen, for being here and sharing work, inspirations. It was really awesome to get to know you guys better. So what do you think it means to be a good man? What